Well, I have some bad news. Maybe. That bad news is that it seems like the peaking did not go away, so I'm still confused as to why this is happening. Okay, testing. No, it's still kind of stuck there. The hell? Testing. Okay. It is literally like it's peaking on the Focusrite. So it seems like the Focusrite doesn't understand it can go higher volume. Because it's definitely maxing out. It's actually more than... Jesus. I may need to reinstall sound drivers or something. That's so weird. What did I just do? I got up, I walked off, and I guess my PC just didn't like that because it suddenly switched settings. Now the question is which setting got switched. Not one that I'm familiar with, unfortunately. Let me just reinstall the Focusrite drivers real quick, since that seems to be where the limitation is. It looks like the mixer is working fine. It's a weird thing to be spending some time on. Device manager. Focusrite audio. Let's go ahead and update the drivers. At the risk of breaking something, I'm going to uninstall the device. And we'll see. Okay, it seems like that didn't fix anything. That's so weird. I wonder if that's been going on the entire stream and I just never noticed it. I think it's still going on as long as I'm talking directly into the microphone. It seems like there's an upper volume limitation on the Focusrite, and that is not correct. Like the volume limitation on the Focusrite isn't the upper volume limitation on the ZTE, which leads me to believe that the Focusrite is doing some weird shit right now. Yeah, I did. I'm very confused by this. Oh, hey, Rage. We're having sound issues real quick, so apologies for that. Um, so the problem is that I can turn it down. I can turn down the gain, and it's kind of back where it should be, but it's still not actually correct because now the mixer is too quiet, and I can't increase the mixer volume at all. I have no idea why the mixer is like this right now. Huh. Something literally just. I walked away to go to the bathroom, and I came back, and it was just like this. I have done 3 stories tonight, and it's just. They didn't give me any trouble. I didn't notice any problems. Now it seems okay-ish. What's the volume like at this point? I assume there's still a little bit of reverb because the issue is obviously still there. Can't get the damn drivers. It's like driver support. We recently updated. But they don't actually tell you where to get the drivers. What's the volume overall like? If I talk directly into the microphone, there's still a significant amount of reverb. And that's a sort of a bad thing, considering that's where I'm supposed to be talking. That's just... What is going on? Hmm. Testing, testing. Oh! Oh, there is indeed another microphone. Who is it? Testing, 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 testing. Yep. Okay. So, how do we sound now? Hello? Are we still reverberating a little bit? Or are we fine now? If I turn this up, yeah, there's still a little bit of reverb. Testing, 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 testing. Everything is going to be loud in the new headset. You say we fire the sound guy. I am the sound guy. You can't fire me. Okay, so here's the deal. I assume that everyone in chat can currently hear me. Is that correct? Just go ahead and say yeah or no. Oh. Oh, wow. Okay. Are you sure about that, Blackjack? Blackjack just trying to troll me. Yeah, there's 2 mics going. So I just need to figure out where the other mic is. Because here's the deal. I can turn this off. And, oh, hey, look. It's still going at 48 volts. which means that this mic, the one that I'm currently speaking into, is currently unpowered. Where the hell is the other mic? That's so weird. Alternatively, I can just turn this down. How loud / quiet am I? Because I've turned on the gain now, so it should be reasonable. There shouldn't be any reverb at all. Now the problem is that I'm looking at the Discord at not the Discord. Oh, okay, I see. Smart guy right here. Can't believe it. I can't believe you betray me. Yeah, I'm still really quiet. Because there seems to be an upper cap on the amount that is going through the mixer. The mixer's entire sound range is not currently being used. It's only the lower, I want to say about 75%. Yeah, that looks about right. By the way, this is actually really damaging to the voice, just continuing to talk with this, because I'm trying to talk with maximum volume while not shouting. The heck? What is going on? Nope, that didn't work. That didn't work at all. Yeah, like, how loud does it sound now? Because OBS is saying that it's really quiet. I'm not even hitting yellow on OBS. Does it? Blackjack, Dupless? You guys got opinions on this? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll continue like this for now. There's still obviously an issue that I need to fix here, but this is fine for now. That's so weird. It's sound issues. Don't worry about it. Also, good to see you again, Rage. Hope you're doing well. You're so lost. What's going on? Sound problems. That's pretty much all that's going on. It's a story night right now. So we are doing another story, which I think I already rolled for one. Oh yeah, no name yet. That's good. It's the best we can do. Well, let's try not to damage the voice very much. I'm going to have to look into this later and try to figure out what the heck happened. So this is Paladin of Hermes by Mercury the Dealer. Marcus was having a very bad time. His body felt heavy, and his head felt like it was about to explode. What in Hades had he done last night? He looked around the room and realized that he didn't recognize much of anything. The place had a clean wooden floor and carved stone walls, which were clearly expensive. The bed he laid upon was way too soft, and had what was clearly a goose feather pillow. His mind raced to find a logical explanation as to why he was in such an expensive room. Maybe he had been kidnapped? No. Uh, no. No one would bother to pay for such luxuries for someone like him. Maybe he had laid a noblewoman and was in her room? Probably not, considering that no one was here except for him, and he doubted any noblewoman would let others see her with a human. His eyes searched around again and again until he saw perhaps the most perfect sight a man like him could imagine. A beautiful golden staff with two silvery snakes twisted around it, sitting still under the window. He smiled to himself as the memories came back to him and his situation became clearer. He had paid for He had paid for this room himself, and the reason he felt so horrible was due to the excessive amount of drinking from the previous night. All because of that staff. He giggled quietly as he remembered the shocked expression of the owner when he requested that she give him her best room. His giggle was cut short, however, as he heard a knock at the door. His giggle was cut short, however, as he heard a knock at the door. Had he bothered someone, perhaps? It didn't matter. He had paid for his room, and if they had a problem with humans, then they could go to Hades. Marcus waited for a few moments in silence, hoping that whoever was knocking would stop, but alas, his wish did not come true, as the knocker was clearly quite patient. The human slowly crawled out of his bed and walked to the door while trying his best to hide the effects of pain from his body. Calmly standing in the corridor was a young human man, probably maybe in his 20s, clean-shave and athletic build, who seemed quite excited for whatever reason. The man's face lit upon seeing Marcus, and the merchant couldn't help but smile at the man's seemingly genuine happiness. "Good morning, Marcius." Is it Marcius? Okay. "Good morning, Marcius. May we speak for a moment?" The man's voice was energetic, but Marcus couldn't help but flinch at the use of his actual first name. "You may? Who do I have the pleasure of speaking with?" Marcus really didn't want to keep this conversation going, but he had learned a long time ago that politeness was very useful when talking to strangers, especially those who knew his name. The visitor's eyes widened slightly. "Apologies for my manner. I am Hermes." What kind of parents decided to name their children after a god? How pretentious. "And what matter do you want to discuss, Hermes?" He made sure to put more emphasis on the name to make it clear he was running out of patience. Suddenly, Hermes' posture changed completely. His eyes became more focused, and his entire body became unnaturally still. "The matter of my staff." Marcus instinctively reached for his dagger, only to find the visitor's posture had changed back to its happy and excited state just as quickly as it had left. "I fear I do not know what you're talking about, good sir. Now, if you will excuse me, I do have matters to attend to." He could not finish the sentence before Hermes cut in. "Oh, but Marcius, don't you remember? Yesterday you told me you would check to see if my staff was indeed made of pure gold. Did you get it checked with that dwarven friend of yours?" The man's posture stiffened once again. "Unless, of course, you were lying." Marcus's eyes widened ever so slightly at the accusation, especially because he was quite sure the merchant he scanned was an elf and not a human, but he kept his composure. "I am shocked at such an accusation. I would expect a fellow human to know that we were not all thieves. If you are done with these barbaric accusations, I believe I will—" He tried to close the door on the man, but couldn't because the staff was floating in the way. Wait, the staff was floating? Marcus watched in horror as the single most valuable object in his life literally floated away and into the hands of the man. "It is good to have you back." The man locked eyes with Marcus yet again. "Gotta say it." Marcus looked at the man's eyes and realization struck him. He didn't know how or why, but he just suddenly knew who that visitor was. Hermes. The actual Hermes. Marcus had just scammed the god of scammers out of his staff. One side of him was very proud of such a monumental achievement. The other side was absolutely terrified. The divine being swung the staff around as if checking how well balanced it was. Finally, after what felt like hours for Marcus, his gaze fell yet again upon his now trembling form. It was an impressive achievement, you know. I was very drunk, but still. His look became colder and colder as he eyed the human. Fooled by a human, of all things. Very promising. The god's eyes fell yet again upon his own. What about a deal? Marcus' heart skipped a beat. What deal? Hermes' lips formed a smile which Marcus was too familiar with. The smile of a man who knew he'd won. He had the same smile the day before. How does Marsyas, the paladin of Hermes, sound? There we go. Okay. Hello? Yeah. Sorry, Rage. We're just kind of considering. That was a decent story. I'm still here. Don't worry. Okay. Next story would be... Wait, is this the first time that you've attended a story stream? I still need to figure out why the heck I'm not able to use the entire sound settings. Man, we've still got a couple of Christmas and Halloween things. Oh, good. It's been a while since we've done another gas station story. Yeah, that is definitely not... Oh my god. It's gonna bother me for the rest of the night. Remember, Blackjack, don't forget to add the next one after this. Okay, so this is Something Weird Came Into the Gas Station Last Night by Gas Station Jack. One of the very few perks to living with a rare terminal illness is the way nothing ever seems important enough to get stressed about. I'm speaking from my own limited experience, and in no way would I recommend you go out and get your own rare terminal illness if you don't already have one. But in my case, I was able to make peace with the reality of my impermanence early on. Before the diagnosis, when I was a teenager, sometimes I would worry about living up to my own expectations of adulthood, which is absurd when you consider that the town I grew up in, which is absurd when you consider the town I grew up in is the capital of lowered expectations, whose only claim to fame is being the home of a famous bloody Civil War battle and the place where it rained frogs that one time. Don't ask, it's not as interesting as it sounds. I work at the 24-hour gas station near the woods at the edge of town. And as far as jobs go, it's not the best, but not the worst either. Knowing that I won't be here too much longer dulls any ambition to climb the corporate ladder. Some days churn... excuse me. Jesus. Something got stuck in the throat there. Some days churn by without incident, moving the world one step closer to oblivion or whatever. Those are my favorites, where I can pass an entire shift reading a book and minding my own business. I don't need to climb a mountain or visit the Grand Canyon to know what Zen feels like. Tranquility is a quiet, empty gas station at 4 a.m. in the morning. Of course, some days aren't as uneventful. I've experienced rude customers, drunkards, vicious raccoons that fall on the chaotic evil spectrum of the D&D alignment, a handful of armed robberies, and some other things that I can only describe as weird. I had one of the last type of days yesterday. I had been busier than normal in the weeks leading up to this. Some of the wildlife and fisheries agents from neighboring towns had been patrolling the woods pretty heavily, and our gas station was the only place for miles to get fuel or fresh coffee. I don't know what the hubbub was about, but I would guess everyone's been on edge ever since the cows were mutilated. Okay, I think that maybe mutilated is too strong of a word to use. Somebody had been sneaking into cattle farms and shaving the cows bald. Who knows why? Small towns get bored. Well, now it's just going to be called murder at the gas station. You done it. You did it. I had one of the last type of date. Oh wait, where was I? I wasn't paying attention to the... I'm sorry. I'm going to scroll in again. That's better. I wasn't paying attention to the time because I never do, but it was late in my shift in the middle of the night when the deer poked his head inside the gas station. I had just finished my book and was checking my phone for weather updates when it happened. The glass door was pushed slightly ajar, and a large deer with an 8-pointed rack of antlers was slowly inspecting the store, scanning its gaze from one corner to the other, nostrils flaring with each sniff. It stopped moving and pointed its giant black eyes right at me. I remained perfectly still, except to put my phone down, because this was way more interesting than the possible snowstorm heading our way in the next few days. We stared at one another for just a moment longer, until the deer pushed the door the rest of the way open and stepped 1 foot inside. Whatever you're imagining right now, it's wrong, and I know that's my fault because I'm telling you this story, so I apologize. There were a few key details to this deer I haven't mentioned yet. First, the deer's head was about 7 feet off the ground. And second, I could see through the glass of the front doors that this deer was standing upright. From antler tip to pelvis, the deer was just like any other ordinary white-tailed deer I'd ever seen in the woods or the side of the interstate. Tan fur, long neck, confused expression. But at the legs, he turned into something else. If kangarooish were a word, I would call his legs kangarooish. He stepped a kangarooish foot into the store and waited like he was making sure the ground wasn't going to fall out from below him. When it didn't, he put the next foot forward. The door shut behind him, and the deer started walking down the gas station aisles, his antlers barely missing the fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling by millimeters. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I got to work earlier that night, the other worker said something interesting. I was taking over the safe from the only other full-time clerk, Jerry, who, according to what I'd heard from a reliable source, had been pretty salty ever since his cult went and had a mass suicide without inviting him. Before he left, he told me that the lag was getting worse, and maybe it was time we do something about it. You see, there's something wrong with the mirror in the gas station bathroom. There's a delay in the reflection by about a half a second. Sometimes, if the weather's acting up, it gets much more noticeable. We had plans to replace the mirror, but couldn't do it because we're lazy and mirrors are expensive. And besides, how important is it to see your exact reflection anyway? It's a gas station bathroom, not a salon. That wasn't the weird thing, he told me. The weird thing was that a man had come by earlier wearing hunter's camo and left his number, telling Jerry that it was imperative that we contact him in case we see anything unusual. I had dismissed that as being too vague to have any meaning at all. What is unusual at the gas station? A solar eclipse? A bipedal deer? A completely normal day? Besides, I don't work for him, and if he's looking for the deer creature, he can find it on his own. I watched the deer walk slowly towards the bagged chips display and put his nose to it, sniffing voraciously before stepping back and scanning the entire store again. His arms, or front legs, I'm not really sure, dangled at his sides with cloven hooves as he walked over to the refrigerated drink case. He tapped the glass a couple times with his antlers before figuring out how to reach out and pull the door open. It was like watching a toddler figuring out a puzzle. Funny at first, but then just frustrating. I almost got up to help him before finally, mercifully, he got his foot finger, around the handle and the door creaked open. I had to hold back my laughter as the deer fumbled at a bottle of water and somehow managed, barely, to pull it out of the case before sticking the top of it into his jaws and chewing at the cap until it ripped open. Okay, I'll just reject the other. Huh. Where was I? The deer leaned his head back, with the bottle sticking out of his mouth, and stared right at me as he guzzled the whole thing down in one continuous stream. Next, the buck sauntered over to the coffee machine and gave it a whiff. The smell apparently didn't gee-haw with his disposition, as he reared back and shook his head fiercely. Probably for the best. Finally, the buck finished his rounds and walked up to me and stopped on the other end of the counter. From this close, I could smell the creature, and surprisingly, he smelled like grape soda. He tapped his hands, on the counter a couple times, then looked back to where he had dropped the bottle of water, then back to me. Okay, I said. He tapped the counter again, so I went ahead and punched in the code for a bottle of water on the register. That's going to be 89 cents. The deer took a step back and looked down at himself, then started patting his body where his pockets would be, if he were wearing any pants. Then he looked back up at me and blinked a few times. You're putting me in an awkward spot here, I said. Right then, the creature started belting out strange animalistic noises that I can only describe as a combination between donkey and dolphin. I don't know what that means, I said over his noises. But then he just got louder and louder and threw his head back, emitting that weird call into the ceiling. I don't know what you're saying, I said back. I don't speak deer. The creature threw its head back down and barfed up a green wet clump onto the counter in front of me, and then it was silent. I looked at the clump. The deer looked at the clump. The deer looked at me, then back at the clump. Oh. I reached out and grabbed it by the corner. Sure enough, the deer had just coughed up a mucus-covered $1 bill. Okay. I wiped the sliminess off on a dish rag I keep near the register for spills, and then put the bills into the till with the rest of the money before fishing out 2 nickels and a penny, which I offered to the deer, which the deer promptly ate out of my hand. This is a weird story, but it's a gas station story, so I shouldn't be that surprised. He turned towards the door and flicked his tail a few times at me before I noticed a strange tableau outside the store. At least half a dozen other deer were out there, each standing tall on 2 kangaroo-ish feet and staring straight at me. There was another stag, a pack of does, and at least 1 fawn, only 4 feet tall. The buck struggled for a few seconds to pull the door open. Do you want me to? Before I could finish, he had it wide enough to slip outside, and then they all left, walking proudly towards the forest line. It wasn't until about 5 minutes later that it occurred to me that I should have taken a picture or something. But without any proof, I guess I'm just going to have to into. But without any proof, I guess it's just going to turn into one more weird story that nobody will ever believe. I dug through my backpack until I found a book I hadn't read yet and opened it to the first page. It was at least an hour before I had another customer come into the store. Okay. Hold up. Story pending. Story reject. Murder at the gas. There we go. Okay, what time is it? We've probably got time for one more. Depending on how long it is. That one we may not be able to do. That one is multiple chapters long. Oh God. Yeah, we may want to wait on this one. Story restore Calliope's Tale. All right. And of course it gets an hold up. I did not spell that right. Come on. Does it always just roll a new one? From the same... Huh. Maybe it's not as random as I would like. Let me try restoring it one more time and we'll roll another one. What? What is it, Blackjack? It wasn't all random. Ah, some of it was random. Decent chunk of it was random. Okay. I know that it's been a long time since Halloween. We are well into January and are about to hit February. No wonder I read through so many of your stories. I think it's more that you just keep submitting all of your stories. Oh God, hold up. So this would have been great many months ago, but it was never specifically selected, so we just kind of randomly rolled it now. So, woo. Anyway. So this is One Last Trick or Treat by Stray Dog 1980. It's that time of year again. I know how I'm going to be spending Halloween. Same way I have for the past 2 years, slowly nursing a beer in the bar, watching the glass sweat on that smooth, wet wooden counter, staring at it till it goes warm in my hand. I'm not there to get drunk. I'm there to escape. I never wanted to be alone at home over Halloween night again. I promised the deputy I wouldn't talk about that night. The town doesn't need it. Hell, I even deleted the video. But now, with Halloween around the corner, it all comes back. Well, small town law enforcement doesn't care too much about Reddit, much less r/no sleep. I live in a small house at the end of the lane. Another nondescript house down a row of its sisters. Prefabricated mostly. Far enough off the beaten path to be cheap, not so far as to be rural. But close. Pretty damn close. I didn't expect many kids to call around trick-or-treating come Halloween. It's a long road, and most children manage to fill their baskets long before they get to my place. Besides, I quite like the peace and quiet. Halloween used to be a good night to settle down and catch some of the classic horror movies on TV. I kept a couple of bags of candy around just in case some kids actually made it all the way down the lane, but mostly it would be an evening all to myself. I can't quite remember what I was watching that night. Probably because I'd been enjoying an after-dinner beer, and I may have gotten carried away, dozing off after one too many. I woke with a start. My beer had gone warm on the side table, my hand still curled around the can. I winced as I unwrapped my fingers. Something had woken me up. The TV droned on in the background, the senseless drivel of the late-night programming flickering across the room. Maybe it was just some high school kids out after some Halloween party, out on the streets, making some noise that woke me up. I checked the time. Past midnight. I was glad I'd invested in a little security for my house. Just the basics, really. A good camera to cover my front lawn. Motion-activated lights around the front and back. I was trying to make the tough decision of whether to clear up the mess right there and then, or to just kick the can down the road till the next morning, when a loud rapping at the door shattered the silence. The can bounced off the floor, warm beer spraying across the bottom of my track pants. The shock left me too numb to even swear. I had just set the can back upright when the knock sounded again. The rhythmic rap increasingly impatient, the tempo building as I stepped towards the door. I peered around the edge of the window. I saw nothing but my pale face in the glass. It was pitch dark outside. Why wasn't the light working? The knocking stopped. A tree branch, perhaps, or something else tapping on the porch. The peephole glared at me, that little glass orb suddenly bulging with some half-promised horror. I swallowed. Or I tried. My throat was dry, the warm beer on the floor suddenly inviting. Nothing. Oh, it's nothing, I said out loud, hoping that the familiar echo of my voice off the walls would ground me somehow. I walked up to the door and peered out, only seeing the orange cones cast by the halogen streetlights a distance away. Nothing, I thought to myself, feeling childishly stupid. I sucked in a deep breath, feeling my lungs strain, then let the air stream out slowly. Then, another knock. I turned back around to face the door. My heart punched at the inside of my chest, its crazed dance playing counterpoint to the knocking. I wasn't surprised to see my hand shake as I reached for the doorknob. Our town was a safe one, far from the troubles of the big cities, or so we'd read in the paper. We had little more to fear in the night than seeing our trash strewn across the yard by the nimble fingers of raccoons. I threw the door open. The porch lights winked on, suddenly blinding me. I blinked away the white spots from my vision. A pair of children stood on my porch. They must have been 9 or 10. I couldn't see much more off them, because they were in classic Halloween getup. A simple sheet draped over each of them, a pair of holes cut out for them to see through. A pair of small baskets for candy broke the smooth lines of the sheets. The toes of brand-new dress shoes peeked out from underneath the sheets. A boy and a girl, I thought. Trick or treat! Such a common refrain. I'd expected the words, but not the delivery. They were but two figures in front of me, yet their voices seemed to come from a great distance away. Trick or treat! The pair spoke again. I felt a little discomfort at the distortion in their voices. More than the weird volume, their voices seemed to blend into each other's, with some strange harmonics at play at the edges. It seemed almost as though they were a choir of two, just there, speaking to me. Treat, I guess, I said. More than anything, I wanted those two away from my house. The whole situation felt wrong. The familiar veneer of the season concealing something deeper, something rotten, like that small panic when biting into a fruit and feeling that lack of resistance. Your teeth sinking into soft mush instead of sweet flesh. For a moment, I blamed the haze of alcohol, the dregs of sleep clouding my judgment, and the adrenaline but adrenaline had swept those far away. My fear was true. I turned to the counter where I kept my keys and grabbed the bag of candy I had prepared for the occasion. I was half hoping that the two figures would be gone when I returned to the door, that they'd been a figment of my imagination, perhaps a shadow of some dream brought on by cheap horror movie and cold pizza. I had no such luck. The pair hadn't moved an inch. They each raised their baskets. There was already an assortment of candy there. They'd had a good day. A bit late for you to be out, isn't it? Where are your parents? The only answer I got was an impatient shaking of the baskets, the rasp of candy wrappers rustling. I held out a handful of candy, ready to drop it and call it a night. I expected to see a small pale hand clutching at the handle of the basket. Instead, I saw the anemic matte sheen of plastic. The basket was draped off the plastic hand of some kind of store mannequin. I was more than thoroughly creeped out by this effective little trick. I shrugged. Maybe the voices were recorded, a little technology to bolster an otherwise traditional costume. I felt the fear melting away as I explained it to myself in my head. Just some clever little children, probably with the help of an adult. Smart, I thought. It had certainly got me going for a while. Stay safe, I told them, dropping the last of the candy into the baskets. They didn't acknowledge me. They just stood still on the worn wooden boards of my porch. I shut the door on them. The window darkened as the lights on the porch shut off. Odd. Maybe the motion detection stopped working. Some unbidden instinct told me to stay there and wait. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the porch as the two walked off. Still, the light stayed dark. My relief grew as the odd strangers left my property. Still, something didn't seem... Still, something didn't sit right. Something wasn't right. The light was working. It turned on when it detected me. It saw me. It didn't see the kids. The sensor was working. It was state-of-the-art, passive infrared, detected motion by detecting changes in temperature, like a human body. Like mine, but not the kids. Whatever was under those pristine white sheets wasn't warm at all. The realization washed over me, like an ice cube running down my spine. My breath came in short rasps. I had to see. I had to know. I could barely bring my hands to the curtains. They were shaking so bad. When I pinched the edge of the curtain between my thumb and finger, the curtain began to undulate wildly. I filled my lungs and peered out through the glass. They were still there, barely 20 yards away, doing nothing, just standing there, motionless, facing the street. As I watched, they both swiveled their heads in perfect tandem to affix two pairs of fathomless eye holes on the window. There was no way. There was no way they could have seen me come to the window. I had to put the back of my hand in my mouth and bite down hard to keep from calling out. They knew. They knew I was there. I backed away from the window, dragging my leaden feet over the carpeted floor. I barely noticed when my heel knocked the can back. The beer leaked out onto the carpet, leaving a widening patch in front of me. I couldn't believe the raw animal fear those two had summoned up in me. Every instinct told me I had to run. Run! Get help! Anything but stay and be trapped in my own house. What could I do? Call the police and tell them that I was scared of two little children trick-or-treating? Call one of my friends past midnight and ask them to come over like a little boy crawling to his parents' room after a nightmare? The situation was ridiculous. My mind told me so. That there had to be a rational explanation for everything. But I could not explain away the light, fluttery feeling in my stomach. I could not rationalize the prickly lump at the back of my throat. They'd only said 3 words to me in those unearthly tones. Who knew how cold those lips were? I shut the door to the kitchen, the sound echoing through the empty house. I turned my chair to face the front door, and then I waited, white-knuckled, for the dawn to come. I must have fallen asleep sometime during that long, cold wait, not daring to move from the chair, paralyzed with fear that one of those shrouded children would appear in my window, or worse yet, behind me. But even that manic store of energy wore out as the night wound to a close. I was woken up by a polite knock on the front door. I sat bolt upright, nearly falling off my chair. I stumbled to the door, a hint of the dread from a few hours ago still lingering like a stale funk in the air. I checked the peephole again. This time I was confronted with the well-scrubbed face of one of our town deputies. We'd been to school together. It was that kind of smallish town where you'd know almost everybody your age if they had a history there. He was an earnest man, tough but fair. "Good morning, officer." "Good morning," he replied. The sour look on his face told me that it was anything but that. His nose twitched as he took in the stale, sour smell of beer steaming off the floor in the morning sun. "Had a good night last night?" I thought back to the night before. No, I didn't. The lawman was quick to see the fleeting shadow of doubt wash across my face. He pressed home his advantage. "You care to explain why you stole 2 mannequins from the store? Dress them up and put them on your lawn?" He shifted to the side and past his door-filling bulk, I saw 2 familiar shapes on my lawn. My lungs wouldn't fill with air. They were still there. They'd been there the whole time. "You okay, buddy?" The big man leaned in, blocking my view, and steadied my shoulder with one of his strong hands. I brushed his hand off and lurched out into the yard, mindless of the freezing dew on my bare feet. The pair stood there, the draped sheets joining in between them. They were holding hands. The 2 of them were holding hands. I brought my palm down gingerly on the head of the one nearer to me. Hard. It felt hard. I felt hard plastic. I whipped the sheet off with one smooth motion. I gave a strangled cry as I stared into the empty green eyes of a child mannequin. I backed away. Too quick. I ended up on my ass on the cold grass, clawing and scrambling backwards until I bumped into the solid legs of the deputy behind me. He'd been quick to recognize my unease earlier. He was just as quick to realize genuine fear. He hoisted me back to my feet and helped me back into my house. "Mind telling me what that was all about?" He dumped me on my office chair in front of the computer. I tried, but I couldn't force the words out. The deputy sighed and settled onto my couch, wrinkling his nose at the empty beer cans on the side of the table. He leaned forward, First call of the morning after Halloween, and I'm chasing down some bullshit break-in to a store in the middle of a town. Now, I've got you hungover and scared shitless from a damn pair of dolls on your front yard. What I know is someone got into a store, smashed up the glass, stole sheets and a couple of mannequins. Bloody kids again. Except the glass. The lines on his brow deepened. I watched his Adam's apple bob up and down. The glass was on the outside of the shop only. Damnedest thing. You've got a camera on your yard, don't you? I nodded, dumbly. Let's say you give me another 10 minutes of your time, tops. We go through that footage. I see who put those things on your lawn. Then I'll be out of your life, hopefully for good. I turned to face my computer and called up the stored videos on my hard drive. They were all transferred by Wi-Fi. Convenient for the time I bought the cameras. Just put on double speed backwards. We'll see who set them up here soon enough. I hit the reverse play key and upped the speed. I saw the two of us scuttle from the house to the lawn and back again. Then the first rays of the sun retreating from the grass, pulling back over the pair of figures until they were back in darkness. The two of them stood there, motionless for the longest time. When the two figures moved, all by themselves, in a jerky swaying motion, back from my lawn to my front door, the cursor danced a little jig in the corner of the screen as the shakes returned, stronger than before. The sharp hiss behind me told me I wasn't alone in my discomfort. I shuddered as I watched myself on the screen, so close to the two abominations, giving them a handful of candy each. I slowed the recording back to normal speed. On screen, I saw myself turn back into the house to retrieve the candy. The two figures stood there, impassive. As one, they both fixed those dark eye holes on the sheets on the camera. There was something else unmistakable. There was a slight pulse in the sheets, a small undulation. The mannequins were breathing. I've seen enough. I turned to look at the deputy, his face as white as sheets on the shrouded figure on the screen. Sorry. Let me try that again. I turned to look at the deputy, his face as white as the sheets on the shrouded figures on the screen. His hands tight around the His hands tight around the grip of his sidearm. That, of all things, scared me most of all. A symbol of law and order, who had seen the worst of what our little community had to offer, just as scared as I was and ready to pull a gun in my house. I clicked the window shut and got up. I wandered over to my cabinet. I pulled out a pair of tumblers and a bottle of the good stuff. The bottle gave a couple of contented glugs as I sloshed the rich golden whiskey into the glasses. I set one down in front of the other man and took a sip from my glass. A lawman could lose his job drinking on duty. The deputy didn't hesitate when he emptied half the glass. He didn't look at me when he spoke. My old Nan wasn't from around here. She was back from the old country, across the sea. She hated Halloween. Said there were things out that night that weren't meant to see the light of day. One night a year, she told me. For one single night, some things were set loose. The candy and costumes were a new thing. Back in the past, on All Hallows Eve, good folk crossed themselves and prayed and stayed in. Whatever's on that recording, it's not what our town needs. You understand? Dumb high school kids, I said, the lie taking shape and form in my mouth. Fooling around. The lie fleshed out took on a veneer of credibility. That would be the explanation. No one had to know the dark kernel of that story. And your camera. It was having technical difficulties that night. Never was a good piece of equipment. Regretted buying it the same week. He stuck out his hand and we shook it. And I have kept my word to now. There isn't a good reason why I broke my promise. I'd never known true fear till that night, but I replay it in my head, over and over. The recording is long gone, of course, but every detail of that night has been branded on my mind. I remember the fear, but I cannot think of a single action the two of them have done to threaten me. Eerie, unnatural, but without a drop of malice. It'll be Halloween soon. I know where I'll be on that dark night. Some things roam the streets that shouldn't be there. The masks and costumes aren't always for the children. Sometimes they're for the adults. For our own protection. After the deputy left, I watched the video, forwards, just once. I remember seeing the two figures on my lawn, slowly inching their hands up, locking them under the sheets, and waiting for the sun to rise. Things that shouldn't be out on this good earth. But sometimes, just sometimes, they just want the simple things. Like one last trick or treat. Damn, that one was well told. I'm going to have fun editing these. Some of these are actually, they've been really fun to read. Ugh. Indeed. Yep. Alright, so usually I only do these for around 2 hours, and we had some technical difficulties today. But I will go ahead and wrap up here. Otherwise I'm going to be editing for ages. And I need to go and figure out the deal with the technical difficulties, because something's going on and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So, yeah. I hope everyone enjoyed these. If you are at all interested in this, we do this every Monday. Feel free to give a follow, and we also have a Discord community that you can join. I've been trying to make sure that the Discord community is fairly active. Discord. But yeah, I will see you guys all later. Thank you so much for listening. Let's go ahead and raid someone. I don't know who's on right now, but we will find out together. Indeed, Rage. The funny thing is that it's from a Discord called, not a Discord, a Reddit thread called No Sleep. Also, thank you to my various Patreon supporters. Tenace Games, Zebgrin, Slime Hunter, Walks with Gorillas, my dad, Gremlin Kev, Desalona, Miss Mango Plays, NBFF, Alpha Mango, Kawok, Veritanium, and Molly Copper. If you are at all interested in supporting, we are trying to reach 16 patrons this year of any kind. Or of any level, so feel free to take a look at that. Anyway, I'm gonna send you all off, and yeah, you know what, I don't want to raid Cool Eagle, because Cool Eagle's probably about to end. He usually is around this time. Let's go ahead and raid Roseguard. Who is currently doing Sekiro, which is also fairly supernatural. Alright. Good night, everyone.